Hey everybody, welcome to JJ Atkins Art. Today we got a very special video for you, and all we're going to kind of start off with is a really quick time lapse of the ink drawing that we're going to use to do some coloring. Purpose of the video today, we're going to talk about the coloring method, but more to the point, we're really going to be talking about how to lay in easy shadows and easy light sources to give that three-dimensional look to your final art piece here. So as the time lapse goes here, let me just kind of point out that this is a character Luther, or number one, from the Umbrella Academy series. Not so much the TV show on Netflix, but the comic book. And this reference drawing that I used to create this actually comes from the comic book drawn by Gerard Way, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's a Brazilian comic book artist. So, without further ado, the ink drawing here is almost done in our time lapse. Once we kind of see the final version of it, we'll switch over into kind of a live drawing setting, so to speak, and we'll show you how we get the coloring done on this. So stay tuned. I think you're going to really like this trick. And since I got a second here, take a moment, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out a lot. And if you're feeling a little bit happy with your trigger finger, hit that like button too. Okay, so we're in Procreate, kind of doing, for lack of a better term, we're going to call it a live recording, even though nobody will be watching this live. But we're going to just kind of see in real time how we get some of this coloring done. And just to kind of start, we're going back to the pencil sketch. And I want to kind of show you my layer stack at this point. Now, I've got some stuff prepared to make the time go by a little bit faster on this. But you can see that I have my pencil layer here. My inks are over top of it, just like so. And again, I got a couple of other layers that I've added in just to kind of show you, how some of this stuff is done, even though I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit. So, for example, I've already put in my midtones. Now, when I say midtones, I'm really just kind of talking about the basic colors that kind of make up the composition, but with no shadow and no light. Even though I have those big, bold black shadows in there in my line work, I'm going to be adding some additional shadow coloring to this piece to give it more of a three-dimensional feel on the page. And there is a nice little trick on how to do this that I'm going to show you right now. Make a duplicate of the ink layer, and then go into the bottom layer, and I can go in and punch in colors just by dragging them in to the little spots where they kind of belong here. So I can kind of come in here and do this. And I had something of kind of a bluish gray color for a lot of his torso and arms. And again, notice that this kind of color drop and fill method really just kind of speeds up this whole process. I can get this whole thing colored in pretty quickly. Now, again, I've already done this just to save us some time. So let me just go ahead and delete it. We'll go ahead and put back in our midtone layer. And now that we've got all these base colors in, we can start working on shadow and light tones. Now, to do that, again, we're going to do some tricks with our layers. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to add in 2 layers here in between my midtones and my ink layer that sits on the top here. Okay. Now, I want to clip, or rather put a clipping mask on the layers above my midtones. What a clipping mask is able to achieve for me is it keeps it so that way I can color anywhere I want without coloring outside the lines that I've originally established in my midtones. So, for example, if I'm going to use this layer right here and I just choose just something obnoxious, like a nice pink color or something like that, notice as I can draw through it, I can draw anywhere I want, but I never go outside wherever my midtone layer had established pixels. So I can just draw anything I want without going outside the lines. This is going to help my shadow and light quite a bit. So let me again clear that out. We'll start over. And I want to label these layers just so it makes it a little bit easier to keep track of what we're up to. So my darks are going to have their own layer, or my shadows, if you prefer to call it that. I also am going to have a light layer. Okay, and what we're going to do here is use a blend mode to help us achieve this little trick in light and shadow. So under my darks, I'm going to change this N standing for normal layer, basically no custom settings. And I'm going to click on the N to open up my blend options. And for shadows, I always use the one up towards the top there, multiply. Okay. I also do something similar for light. We want a blend mode for this. We're going to change it to hard light. Now, I have noticed with light, I can vary this up a little bit. Sometimes I want a soft light. Sometimes vivid light looks a little bit better. It just depends on what the piece is and what sort of tone I'm going for. But shadows are almost always in multiply. Now, what do these blend modes do? Well, the beauty of these blend modes is that, especially with multiply, I can use it to cheat my shadows. So I can just use one color and paint over everything, and it'll create kind of a shadow effect. So let's just kind of take that home a little bit. I want to go over here to my top layer where I've set up a palette already. And all this is a black bar. But I'm using it to hold on to some colors that I'm going to keep coming back to and using over and over and over again, specifically my shadow and light colors. So let's establish those really quick. All right. So let me just make sure I'm on the right layer here. I'm on the palette layer. Okay. And I'm going to just choose a shadow color. Now, I want warm light a cool shadow on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a cool shadow. That means going into this blue territory, but I really want to desaturate it. I want to get a lot of the blue out of it and go for mostly a mid-gray with just a hint of blue in it like that. And I'm going to put that color down right here just so I can come back and choose it again anytime I need it. And just in case I need some darker shadows, I'm going to create a darker version of that. I'm just going to move my pointer here down a little bit, get into this darker area, and I'm going to choose that one too. Now, believe it or not, under a blend mode, especially with multiply, these colors will get darker. You'll see this darker blue, even though it looks kind of grayish, will get almost black. So we'll kind of see some evidence of that a little bit later. Now, I'm going to set up my light colors too. Again, I'm going to go opposite end of the spectrum here. So I'm going to go with kind of a warm orange yellowish. And I want to get really kind of up in there. Again, desaturated, mostly gray, but I want a little bit of a hint of the color there. And notice how it comes in mostly yellow. Again, on our blend mode, that'll change the color there a little bit. All right, and then again, I'm going to get something a little bit more towards white, so that way I have something that's really bright. And just in case I need it, I'm going to go almost pure white in case I need like some highlight color later on. That's going to be used very, very sparingly, but I've got it there in case I need it. And that's it. That's my palette. All my shadows are going to be those two colors on the left. All my lights are going to be the three colors on the right. So let's go start applying them, okay? I got a dark layer all set up to a multiply mode. I'm going to go ahead and choose my lighter shadow color. And now it's just time to lay in those shadows. So again, it's time to draw on our shadows. And you're going to see here that a really interesting little trick takes place. So I'm going to start on the arm where we have mostly this kind of blue-gray torso color going. And I'm going to start working on the right arm here and kind of laying in the shadow next to the kind of the big bold black shadow that was created by the ink work. All right. Now I'm just kind of coloring it in pretty casually here. This might be a little bit sloppy. Remember, the idea here is that we're just kind of doing an exercise. So this may not necessarily be the most perfect piece of art you've ever seen. Notice what I've done here, okay? So I've got some shadow laid in here, and I've got a very distinct color out of it, kind of this bluish gray, similar to the one that I picked when I originally chose it out of the color picker. But now we're going to move up into this orange area where he has this kind of collar to his suit, and I'm not going to do anything to change my color. I'm going to use the same color I was using, that blue-gray that's kind of up here in my palette, but now I'm just going to paint it over in this orange area and take a look at what happens. My shadow color gets in here, but notice how it kind of adapts to the orange that I'm laying it over top of. That's the beauty of that blend mode. So it will kind of let the color that's beneath shine through the shadow color that I'm putting in. It's almost like I'm painting it in almost translucently, and some of the color from beneath is kind of coming through. So I've got a bluish shadow that matches up with the blue in the torso. I have an orangish shadow that matches up with the orange in the collar. And I can do this really kind of all over my piece without having to change the color of my shadow, and I get the effect that I'm going for here. And you can kind of see that because of the fact that I don't have to keep going back to my palette and changing things around, I really have the ability here to kind of like punch in these shadows pretty quickly and make them look like they're supposed to. You know, like genuine shadows that are not just pure black, but match up with the color that they're meant to kind of enhance. Okay, so I'm just going to get some of this stuff in here, and you can kind of see how quickly this goes in if you have a good idea where you want your shadows to begin with in the first place. And because we have a lot of this stuff in bold black already, I'm not going to have to do a whole lot of work on this, but I still want to kind of get some of this stuff in here really quick, just so we have a completed piece to look at the end. Kind of get this in the belt area too. I got these wires I'm going to have to work around here. And if I'm being honest, there are some smarter ways to do this. I could be putting these wires on a separate layer so that way I don't have to worry so much about, you know, kind of over coloring or anything like that. But for right now, this works pretty effectively. So I'm just going to kind of keep it as is. And again, allows me to kind of get through stuff pretty quickly. So I'm just going to move through it, even though I might be making a couple mistakes along the way. Thing you might want to be aware of when you're putting in your shadow here is that this might look like it's coming in a little dark right now. A couple reasons for this. Number one, it is pretty dark. That may not necessarily be the final shade that I go through for these shadows. If I find that this is too dark later on, I can go under the layer stack, find the layer that applies the shadows, and ultimately just lower the opacity on it, just to kind of weaken the intensity a little bit and get a little bit more subtle color difference between the shadow and the midtones and light. The reason I'm not making any adjustments right now is because I want to get my shadows in, number one, before I do anything else. But number two, I don't have any light source built in here yet. And until I do, I can't really be sure whether or not these shadows are too dark or too light yet. The idea being that when I put in some of the light source here, you're going to see that some of this darker shadow kind of balances out a little bit. And that's really what we're trying to achieve here, is a balance between light and dark. So that way, again, that we fool the eye and create this sense of three-dimensionality on the page. All right. So I've kind of got a lot of shadow in here. There's probably some more touch-up I could be doing here and there. But just to kind of give you an example of what I'm talking about here, why don't we go ahead and move on into our light layer and start adding in some lights to provide some balance. Now, lights I tend to do a little bit differently. You'll notice I'm just kind of drawing in shadow as I go along here. As a matter of fact, let me just put in this one on this torso just to kind of keep things consistent. There we go. And what I can do from here now is I can, again, go into my light layer and the light colors that I created for my palette and start adding in my light source to try to achieve some sense of balance. So let's go ahead and do it. All right. Remember, I got to change layers for this. I have a light layer that's set to a hard light blend mode. And I'm going to choose my yellow color right here. And we're going to do something a little bit different here. Now, again, this is a method that's used by a lot of comic book artists. Tweak it, use it for your method. I don't always go this route with this, but sometimes I do. Sometimes I kind of tweak the step here a little bit to just kind of make it work for me. But ultimately, all I'm going to do is I'm going to use the select tool to select an area on our body here where I want to see that light source come in. Now, light usually can come in a little bit too intense, so I'm going to worry about the opacity of this right from the get-go. So all I did was I just drew out a section that I wanted to select on the torso where I wanted that light source to go. Again, I want this to be a little bit subtle, so I'm going to choose a soft brush or a soft airbrush for this. Again, just a normal tool included in Procreate. And I'm going to make the opacity pretty low here over on the right-hand side. I only want this maybe about 35% or so. And I can always darken it by just kind of redrawing over that area. But for right now, I just want something soft and subtle in there. So I'm basically drawing in the area that I selected and kind of separated from the rest of the piece. And notice it's going in real subtle, not a lot of intensity here. And now that I kind of got that in, I'll remove that selection tool and notice how it shows up on my torso. So I've got some light coloring here that is meant to represent something of a light source. And, this is a little bit dull, a little bit yellow. So I'm going to go back in and add in my second light source, my brighter one, and do something similar. So I'm going to go in here with the select tool again, and I'm just going to select a couple of areas where I want kind of that intense light. And we'll get something here on the arm as well. And certainly the forearm needs to be dressed also. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll go get back into our soft airbrush. We'll paint this in. Again, this is a lighter color than the one we were using before. And so there we go, a little something like that. Now, it looks a little bit out of place here, right? Again, remember, balance needs to be achieved. So we're going to keep doing this over and over and over again until we achieve the effect that we're looking for. Now, look, I've already kind of done this and completed it on another canvas, so to speak. So give me a second to switch over to the other canvas, and we'll kind of show you what the finished product looks like when we get there. Be right back. Now that we're back here, you can see that I've finished up the shadow and the light layers. And again, this is another canvas that I'd already kind of completed the work on. So I also added some rim lights with this kind of purplish color on the right-hand side. And I did kind of do most of the rim light on its own layer. So that's that layer added in right there. We can kind of see how that looks. So we're pretty much done with the palette now. I'm going to hide that. Let me go ahead and add in the background layer. And I think this will make a little bit more sense now, right? So even though we had all that black behind him, in the torso area and the lower arm and the feet and everything, this purple rim light allows us to kind of see where the figure takes shape despite the black background. And in addition, it gives it an additional light source to give it more interest and allows it, again, just kind of pop off the page, look a little bit more three-dimensional. So if you have any questions about the quick shadow method, feel free to leave some comments in the comments section. I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you need a more in-depth tutorial on this, also let me know. In addition, just kind of bear in mind here, I do this for almost all my pieces. So if you go back and look at any of my other artwork, you'll see that I've used the same palette and shadow method and light method over and over and over again. So having said that, again, take a moment to subscribe if you haven't done so already. I want to take an opportunity to sign off right here and thank you for your time. But please stop back soon. I'll have more content very, very shortly. Thanks again.